glad you're here today. You look at this instrument here, and we're so familiar with it. But this instrument here wasn't around forever. The modern, strong, brilliant pianos with their wrought iron frame and their hammerheads striking the strings are capable of filling a great big huge concert hall with beautiful sound. But they weren't developed like this until the industrial age. Before that, during the Baroque period and previous, but especially during the Baroque period, the harpsichord was the harpsichord and the organ was the main instrument for keyboards. And they're very different than the piano. The harpsichord plucks the string, whereas the piano hits the string. And this is highly developed now. But during the Baroque, the harpsichord was a small instrument, and it had just a sound that might fill this room or a big grand ballroom, but it couldn't be played very louder because no matter how hard you hit the string, it made the same sound. So there was no such thing as a crescendo and a decrescendo on a harpsichord. And the sound didn't sustain either. So they put a lot of trills and stuff in it to keep the sound going sometimes. And it would play with an orchestra, but it would just be in the back, and that would be doing chords for harmony reasons. But when it was played as an instrument, solo instrument, it was very different from a piano. So, okay. So anyway, I've chosen to, and Bach, of course, J.S. Bach, was a master at the organ and the harpsichord, and he wrote a lot of pieces for keyboard instruments as well as everything else. I mean, he was just a tremendous, tremendous composer. I've chosen these three movements. The suite has really 5 or 6 movements, but I've chosen these three and I'm going to play them on the electronic keyboard, which has a harpsichord stop. It's kind of like the sound of a harpsichord, but it's not really quite as delicate as a real harpsichord would have been. If a harpsichord needed to make more sound, or they wanted to have levels of difference of sound, some harpsichord keyboards had 2 keyboards, one on top of one above the other, and the player would go from one to the other if you wanted to have some differences. So we might play one movement on the loud, and then he'd play the other movement, the second part of that, repeat on the lower keyboard. So that's how sometimes, if we want one hand to be louder than the other, he'd play it on one and the hand on the other one. So, but that was the only way you could change the dynamics. The French suites were written between 1722 and 25, and they were written for the harpsichord in the style of dances. So there's an Allemande, a Sarabande, a gigue, Gavotte. Those are all names of dances that were popular in Europe. But these were not meant to be performed and have people dance to them. But when you're listening to it, they are in the style of that dance. So you can somewhat imagine, in the first one that I'm playing, it's an Allemande, there'd be bowing, and they'd be prancing around with their beautiful dresses, and this was a showplace. Dances where they would show off, and they were always bowing to each other and whatever. And the last one, the Gavotte, they would be, if they were not this one, but if they were dancing a Gavotte, they'd be dancing around, hopping and skipping, and it's quite a lively piece. So you can kind of imagine that when you hear these.